In today's over-explained guide, we dive deep into the arts of constructing your very own outpost. From picking the perfect system to mastering interstellar cargo links, we've got you covered. The too long didn't read version of this is make sure you pick systems that have multiple planets you can put an outpost on. When settling on a planet, look for where biomes cross over, and most of the time you can pick up additional resources that way. And pay close attention to aluminum, copper, and nickel. Those are the three main resources used in simple fabricators. So if you're looking to make a manufacturing outpost, keep an eye out for those. If that's all you wanted, make sure you leave a like on your way out. But those of you that are interested in the deep dive, without further ado, let's kickstart our exploration into Starfield's outpost. First, we're going to start with how to pick a system and a planet. We'll first start with how to select a planet, and in today's guide we're looking first at Muffred 4. This planet has moderate flora, marginal fauna, and 8 resources. When you're looking to settle a planet, you want to try to make sure that it has some kind of wildlife on there because they can provide additional resources to your outpost. For example, some of the plant life could contain sealant, which is a super common resource used when building like actual structures and buildings in your outpost. And as you can see, the resources are H2O, aluminum, chlorine, iron, argon, and these three last resources on the tail end are kind of the rare resources that aren't always that common to find. The diamonds above indicate the rarity. So you can see the lithium on the very far right hand side would be the rarest element found on this planet. In addition, this planet has 3 traits. Simply put, planet traits are geological features on the surface of a planet. Scanning these will grant you more experience, and they count towards getting a 100% scan on a planet. One other thing to mention quickly is most of the time, these planet traits, when you go there, they have some kind of resource pile, like either a rock pile or a dung pile that you can loot, and it has pretty good resources. Now that we found this suitable planet, let's take a look at the solar system as a whole. And here you can see there are a decent amount of planets, along with a lot of moons in orbit around these planets. Hovering around some of these planets, we can see that there are multiple resources, and some planets even have 8 resources as well. The main thing I'm looking for here is planets with diverse resources. On the first planet we were looking at, it had aluminum and iron. So now I'm pretty much looking for copper, nickel, or any other resources that weren't on that first planet. The reason that it's kind of important to look at other planets in the solar system is because you can set up cargo links between those planets, and then you can establish an interstellar cargo link to link to other systems as well. That way you have all of your outposts connected and have a wider range of resources to use to then improve your outpost further. So overall, when picking a system and picking a planet, you want one to have a decent array of resources that can be found within that system. Same with flora and fauna. And then when selecting your first planet, you want to make sure that it has one of the following combinations of aluminum iron, aluminum nickel, aluminum copper, copper beryllium, or copper argon. These are some of the most common resources mixed together with a simple fabricator. But don't worry about that too much because later on in this guide, we will cover simple fabricators in more detail. So at this point, we have decided to settle our first outpost on Muffred 4, and now we get into the next part of the tutorial guide, which is how to pick your outpost location. So a little bit of background here is each planet has different biomes on it. These biomes contain different resources, and one of the things you want to do is look for where those biomes might overlap that has resources that you might need. And so you can see on the poles of this planet, there's argon, the kind of dark bluish color. So if we were in need of argon, we would have to pretty much settle an outpost in that area and hopefully find some overlap of iron and aluminum as well. What I'm personally looking for in this outpost is aluminum and iron. Any other resources that I get are just added benefits on top of that. And you can see here, I found this little bit of an area that has some aluminum, some chlorine, some H2O, and some iron, all kind of within the same area. We have some forest biome next to some swamp biome, and then the iron is located near the hills. So let's go ahead and land and start looking for the perfect spot to set up our outpost. Once you land, exit your ship and enter scanner mode. See if there's any points of interest near you. Some good things to keep an eye out for are caves or those planet traits that we talked about before. That just gives you added benefits for something to do in your free time when you're waiting to build up your outpost. Here's another tip that is super useful when trying to pick your outpost location. What you'll want to do is go into your scanner and then press the outpost button. For PC it's R, and pay close attention to the top left of your screen. This will show you the available resources near you. And you can see at my landing location, all we had was water by us. This is not a great location for your outpost. One useful tool when selecting a place for your outpost is the surface map. This shows the different levels of terrain. So if you remember, iron was found in the hills, and then all the other resources were kind of found in the swamp and forest biome. So what we would be looking for here is where the terrain switches from kind of flat land to hills, and hopefully we'll be able to find some nice overlap of resources. Another great tip is to go to the high ground. I climbed up this mountain, and now you can clearly see the difference in biomes between the hills and the swamp/forest area that we were before. And you can see the clear difference of the two biomes, green and lush, and then gray and rocky. It's around here where these two biomes meet up that we would want to settle an outpost. That way we get some iron, along with aluminum and other resources like that. Once we make our way down, you can see there's some more resources available now. We have iron, alkanes, aluminum, and water. I know what you're thinking, H2O probably isn't that important, but hear me out. If you go down the botany path and want to be able to set up a greenhouse and grow some of your own crops from the planet, H2O is needed for that route. And as I mentioned before, for the simple fabricator, iron and aluminum are one of the combos that can be used to make manufactured goods. Alkanes was one of the more rarer resources on the planet as well, so these 4 resources are probably good enough for me to settle my first outpost here. Now this video is chopped up a lot, but overall I think I spent like somewhere close to 4 hours finding a place for my outpost, setting up another location, and doing all the cargo links. So my other tip, guys, is don't feel rushed to set up an outpost. Make sure you're happy with the location and the resources that you have available. At this point, we went over how to pick your system, how to pick your planet, and how to pick your actual outpost location. If you're liking this over-explained guide, make sure you drop a like and subscribe for other videos like this. Now let's talk about resources. In your outpost menu, navigate to the extractors tab. This is pretty self-explanatory. This is how you extract the resources within your outpost border. For example, you can see here I'm setting down an aluminum extractor. Switching over the different extractor types will highlight the resources within your boundaries. Sometimes you're not able to put extractors directly next to each other, so make sure you save some room on the highlighted area for expansion. Now that we have our aluminum extractor down, we need to power it. The nice thing about Starfield Outpost is your power doesn't necessarily need to be connected directly to that extractor. Your power can be built anywhere within your outpost border, and pay close attention to the bottom right hand side of the screen where it shows power needed and then the total power produced. You'll also want to see here on the wind turbine, you can see on this planet we're going to be producing 6 power. So this one turbine will be enough to power the extractor that I built so far. Next up is storage, but you can see we're low on adaptive frames. Let's navigate to crafting and select industrial workbench. This will allow us to build some adaptive frames that we need to set up some storage. And we can see here adaptive frames take iron and aluminum. Good thing our outpost produces both of those. Let's build some, go back to the crafting menu, and now navigate back to storage and build some storage for our solid materials, like the aluminum we're mining. Place it down, toggle to the bird's eye view, select the extractor, right click on it, and then link it to the storage container. Now, any resource that extractor produces will make its way to that storage container. The flow of resources in your outpost is going to be super important and plays a huge role in our next section, Simple Fabricators. Before we progress on to the next section, I want to set up a second outpost over here at 5B. I'll use this as an opportunity to walk you through my thinking of setting up this second outpost, and we can reiterate some of the key points before diving into Simple Fabricators. This planet has a civilian outpost on it, which would be perfect for trade, along with copper, lead, and tungsten. One of the resources we were missing to be able to build an iron extractor. And actually, 4 out of the 8 resources here are actually kind of labeled as rarer resources, and there's a decent amount of flora fauna as well. This looks like a great second location to set up an outpost, and then establish a cargo link between the two to share uncommon resources. Now we're looking for where to set up the outpost. And this area looks great. It looks like we have lead, copper, H2O, and probably some other resources as well. So let's set this as a landing destination. One thing I forgot to mention is also don't feel bad about kind of going back to the planet menu and then selecting a different place to land. There's been some planets where I set up an outpost and I probably landed in like 4 or 5 different locations before actually finding one that I wanted to settle at. So let's go ahead, get off our ship, and start scanning some of the key points of interest around us. Next, we'll want to drop down an outpost to see what resources are available, and nothing much by us. And again, what I do is I head over to the mountains so that I have a higher point of view and can see the different resources available. Here we're starting to see a combination of 3 or 4 different resources, so we know we're getting to a point where we would want to drop an outpost. And you can see again the change of biomes there, the light gray area to the dark gray with a little bit of plant life and wildlife. And as I mentioned before, usually this matchup of biomes is a great place to settle an outpost. We have a lot of new resources in this area that we don't have on our very first outpost. So let's go ahead and settle this location here, and let's go ahead and start extracting some resources. The main one that I'm looking for is copper, but you can see we don't have the building requirements for that, so that means we are going to have to mine some resources by hand. Before we do that though, we can put an extractor down for chlorosilene. This is a rare resource that's only found on like 150 planets and moons in Starfield. So we're here, we have the resources, we might as well set up this liquid extractor. The other thing I wanted to mention while we're here is about the wind turbines. Surprisingly, where you place them does not affect how much energy it produces, but as you can tell here, we're only getting 3 power compared to our last planet that got 6. So when you're setting up your energy, make sure you pay close attention to what is better on your planet, solar or wind. I'm going to set down these 3 wind turbines here, which gives us plenty of room for expansion. Next, we'll go ahead and put a liquid storage down and then connect our extractor to the storage. And now that we finally have something set up, let's go ahead and start mining some of these resources like copper and tungsten by hand. Some of the resources that we needed to continue to set up our outposts on the other planets. And now the beautiful thing about having 2 planets settled in the same system is you can fast travel back and forth to them. If you followed this guide and had an array of resources available to you in both locations, this is going to be perfect for the fast traveling because you can get any resource that you need quickly. While I'm mining those resources, let's change our focus to the next section, that of simple fabricators. There are 11 different fabricators that you can put in your outpost, and basically what these do is turn raw material into manufactured goods. And at a super high level, this is all you do is connect the storage container to the simple fabricator, and then you'll build a warehouse, and the end product will make its way to the warehouse. Before we get too deep into the connections and how to set it up in your outpost, let's first look at the different types of fabricators and what resources they take in. In this first image that I have on screen now, you can see the different resources that the simple fabricator takes in. I broke this down into mineable resources, which include aluminum, copper, nickel, and so on. I also broke it out into other resources, which are liquid extracts or stuff that you can get off of vendors or wildlife on your planet. And the final category is manufactured resources. So the type of simple fabricator that you build on your outpost will be greatly determined by what resources you have available on that planet or within that system if you decide to build a cargo link to it. I also wanted to draw attention to the right hand side. I listed out all the resources used in the simple fabricator and how many times they were used. So for example, you can see aluminum, copper, and nickel were the most common mineable resources used. So in this table here, I have the different simple fabricators, their inputs, and their output. So for example, if we had aluminum and iron, we would be able to put those two raw resources into a simple fabricator, and that would spit out an adaptive frame. I also have the other 11 outputs listed here, and highlighted in blue are the examples that we'll go over in this video. Now, let's look at this simple chart that I put together. In the input section, all of these inputs require aluminum in addition to the other mineable resource. So, for example, aluminum and copper, the orange box, get fed into a simple fabricator, and the output is a reactive gauge. You can do aluminum and nickel to make mag pressure tanks, or aluminum and iron to make adaptive frames. Let's go through another example. This example is a little bit more complex. The input is aluminum copper to make a reactive gauge, and aluminum and nickel to make a mag pressure tank. With those two manufactured items and alkalines, you can then put it into another fabricator to make monopropellant. This is one of the more complex recipes in Starfield that I have found. Hopefully these flow diagrams have helped you understand a little bit more about simple fabricators, but if not, don't worry, because now we are going to get into an in-game example of turning iron and aluminum into adaptive frames. Alright, to start off, let's go back to Muffred 4, our main outpost. We can go ahead and put down an iron extractor. If you remember, we already have an aluminum one. Let's go ahead and connect that back to our storage unit. And then you can see in the bottom right hand side, we also need a little bit of power. So let's go ahead and add some more wind turbines. Let's add enough so we can keep expanding the outpost as well. And while we're at it, we might as well drop down one of these alkaline extractors. We don't have a liquid storage, so we'll just leave that as is for now. And now you can see in our regular storage, we have aluminum and iron coming in. Going to our Outpost tab, we can toggle through the different fabricators with the Q and T buttons, but we are missing a zero wire. To build a zero wire, we need some copper. Luckily, we have that on our other outpost, and now what we can do is go ahead into the build area, select the copper extractor. We have to find the location where we can put this, which is up on this hill, and just kind of finagling it a little bit, kind of tilting it side to side, we find a spot where we can set it down at. And just for good measure, I go ahead and drop another copper extractor. Making my rounds up the hill, I do notice the one extractor is working fine, but the second one is not producing anything. You can see the main issue here is that we still need more power. So let's go ahead and drop another wind turbine down. So let's head back to the main outpost, build some zero wire, and now we should be good to start manufacturing some goods on our first outpost. Before we build anything, I'm going to build a little airlock, but you can see what I'm doing now is I'm going through the extractors, and I'm just making sure that this area doesn't have any resources where I'm going to build my indoor base. And now that we have the blueprint laid out, kind of where we want to have our base, we can go ahead and put one of these fabricators down next to it. And so guys, that's a really nice tip there, is you don't want to build your base over top of resources because then you can't access it. So let's go ahead and build this fabricator right next to where our base is going to be. And we can see that it's our first time building this, so we get a little bit of text dialogue from the game to help us out. But basically it's pretty straightforward. We're going to go to the storage unit and then connect it to the fabricator. We're also going to want to put down a warehouse, and then what we'll do is go to the fabricator and connect it to the warehouse. So now at this point we're going to have iron and aluminum from the storage unit flowing into the fabricator, making adaptive frames, and those frames are going to get sent to the warehouse. Another little tip for you guys is you can build this power switch, and then what you want to do is head over to the fabricator, hold down the E button, select wire, and then wire the fabricator to the switch. This allows you to power on and off your fabricator, so you're not just constantly making adaptive frames like I was. And you can see here, I was actually using almost all of my resources making these adaptive frames. And so here is a little quick tip. I'm not going to make this its own section, but we're going to be looking at setting up a greenhouse and botany overall. So I head back to my second outpost, and here you can see some of the plants that I'm scanning can be used for structures or for sealant. And sealant is actually used to make the greenhouse. So I harvest some sealant, and now you can see I'm able to set down one of these greenhouses. Please note, you have to have the botany skill to be able to have this building. I also set down some power, specifically a solar array. I'm pretty much out of the resources needed to make more wind turbines. And then making my way over to the greenhouse, I actually realized that I still need some water to be able to flow into this greenhouse to be able to produce the sealant. But here you can see the different plants that I'm able to produce. So let's go ahead, select extractors, and we'll go ahead and select the water vapor extractor. Let's go ahead and connect that to the greenhouse. And then once this is connected, let's head back to the greenhouse, and we can see now with the water that it is actually producing some of the sealant that we asked it to produce. Now we're going to be looking at cargo links between the two outpost locations. Right now we're on our main outpost on Muffred 4. Here I'm using the extractors to see a good area where I can build a cargo link where it won't overlap with resources. At each outpost you're able to put down 3 cargo links. Cargo links in Starfield allow players to link their outposts together and transfer materials and items between them, eliminating the need to do it manual. Once you find a location that doesn't have any overlapping resources, go ahead and drop down the cargo link. Usually a good rule of thumb is to put the green and red cargo containers facing an area that you'll normally travel. In between these two is going to be your cargo computer, where you can access and set up the cargo links. Now that we have our cargo link down, what we can do is connect our storage unit directly to the cargo link. One thing to note here is it doesn't necessarily have to be just storage units. You can get your extractor to go right to the cargo link as well. Right now I'm setting up the storage and the warehouse storage, both to link to my cargo. Now we can head to Muffred 5B, where our second outpost is, and we're going to want to go ahead and build another cargo link here. Then what we can do is link the two and have our resources flow from one outpost to the other. You can see here again, I'm looking at the different extractors and making sure I pick an area where there's no overlapping resources. This kind of left-hand corner right behind the greenhouse looks like a good area. Let's rotate it so the input and output cargo slots are facing near the base. And then once we have it in a good location, we can go ahead and set it down. I link up the greenhouse, the solid storage, and the liquid storage all to the outgoing cargo link. Heading over to the cargo link, we can make our way to this container here, the one labeled outgoing, and see what resources are going to be shared with our other outpost. Next, we'll want to go ahead and actually set up the cargo link between the two outposts. And to do that, you access the computer. A nice little thing here is it shows the outgoing and ingoing resources that you'll establish through that connection. In our next section, we're going to be looking at how to turn an outpost into a distribution center. As I mentioned before, you're able to have 3 cargo links in one outpost. The idea here is this distribution center will take all of the resources from your different outposts and store them in one central location. The main reason we're doing this is so that we can eventually set up an intersystem link, with the idea being that all of our resources from one system will flow to a central outpost, which then can be linked to another system's outpost as well. For this central location, we're looking at setting up another outpost on Muffred VD. The key element we're looking for here is helium, which is needed to run the interstellar cargo link, which we'll set up next section. The main point of this section of the video is to establish another outpost, set up multiple cargo links, have all the resources flow to this outpost, and then we'll start next section with the interstellar links. So let's start off by dropping down a helium extractor. The nice thing about building helium extractors in your outpost is it allows you to automatically refuel your ship. One of the little tips, once I place it down, reads that you can set up a chain of refueling outposts to extend the reach of your exploration. Again, our main goal for dropping this helium extractor is so that we can set up the intersystem cargo links. Once we have the helium extractor down, we also need a little bit of power, so let's just find a little spot to go ahead and drop some wind turbines down. Now, to start having resources flow into this outpost, let's go ahead and put a cargo link down. Let's head back to Muffred 4 now, and what we can do is set this outpost to link to the new one we just made on Muffred VD. The outgoing resources will be iron and aluminum, and we'll receive some helium from them. Making our way back to Muffred VD, we can go ahead and drop a second cargo link down, and this one will connect to Muffred VB. This was where we set up the greenhouse, so we'll be receiving copper and sealant from this outpost. Now making our rounds to the different cargo containers on the cargo link, we can see that we're getting iron and aluminum. By holding E on this cargo container, we can then link it to a storage unit. Let's now go ahead and do this to both of the cargo links, and in the next section when we set up the intersystem cargo link, we can connect the storage unit to that interstellar cargo link. And basically what that will do is allow all the resources that flow into this distribution center to go through that one storage unit and then go to the interstellar cargo link. Now, in this section, let's dive into intersystem cargo links. Building these in 2 outposts and linking them together will allow the transfer of goods between them. Items in the outgoing container will be transported to the incoming container in the other outpost, and vice versa. One thing to note here is that there is an operation cost of 5 helium. Before setting this down, just quickly check your extractors to make sure you're not putting this on an area where there's resources. We already have a helium-3 extractor, so let's go ahead and select this and link it to the fuel container on the intersystem cargo link. The fuel container is the one in the back. We have the traditional ingoing and outgoing resource containers on the front as well. In the last section, we set both of the cargo links to put their resources into this storage unit. So now let's connect this storage unit to our intersystem cargo link. And that should allow all the resources that are coming from this system to flow through these cargo links into the storage unit and then into the Intersystem cargo link. With all that set up, let's go head back to Alpha Centauri, where I have some of my first outposts set up. In Alpha Centauri, I have these 3 outposts, one on Voss, one on Zamka, and one on Kurtz. All the resources from these outposts flow into Kurtz, and because Kurtz naturally has helium-3 on it, I'll go ahead and set up my Intersystem cargo link here. But basically what this will allow is all 3 of the outposts in the Alpha Centauri system will be sent to Kurtz, just like all the outposts in Muffred will be sent to VD. Then we'll establish a connection between VD and Kurtz, so our resources can flow between the 2 systems. On Kurtz, you can see I have 2 cargo links set up already, both flowing into the solid storage container. Let's go ahead and put the Intersystem cargo link down and link it up to that storage unit. Both of the cargo links flow through. I'll also want to be sure to set up the helium connection to the fuel source. And now we have all of our resources in the Alpha Centauri system flowing to our outpost in the Muffred system.